And an insecurity is just some aspect of ourselves that we believe is unacceptable. And it might be a physical attribute like a big nose, a receding hairline, or as one of my very kind YouTube commenters pointed out recently, a five head. So uplifting. What's up, you guys, and welcome to this presentation entitled How Your Insecurities Can Ruin Your Life and the Lives of Those Around You. As you can tell, it's a super uplifting title to encourage you today. But this is a very intimate topic for me and something that is very personal for me because I feel like over the last decade of my life, I've had to come face to face with many of my insecurities and see them clearly, embrace them, accept them, and integrate them into the whole of who I am, and then reveal them to the world, despite the voice in my head that tells me that if I do that, everything's going to fall apart. So And I guess I should also say that it has also provided me with incredible freedom to walk forward into those spaces despite the discomfort that arises when I do enter into those spaces. When I get there, I enter into a different reality, a more free and open world without so much pressure from social expectation and the desire to please people and worry about the future and so on and so forth. And I want to start with the question, what is an insecurity? And an insecurity is just some aspect of ourselves that we believe is unacceptable. And it might be a physical attribute like a big nose, a receding hairline, or as one of my very kind YouTube commenters pointed out recently, a five head. So uplifting. But it can also be our deeper thoughts, desires, actions, and really just beliefs about ourselves. And those statements might include I'm not intelligent, or I'm not capable, or I'm not successful, or I'm ugly, or I'm weird, any of those things. And what happens when someone gets near to our insecurities is that it elicits a powerful emotional response out of us. And that response is often fueled by shame and embarrassment and anger. We're trying to protect what we perceive as this sensitive spot within ourselves. And we're trying to sort of keep people away from it because we don't want the world to see it, because we're afraid that if they do, they won't accept us. Our response often causes damage to ourselves and others, and we go on the defensive when we try to hide or disown our insecurities, essentially kind of trying to be like, that's not me. And oftentimes we create entire personas or false fronts built around protecting these insecurities. Again, the statement is, I can't allow the world to see the true me. And so our insecurities are these pieces of ourselves that we view as unacceptable. And to have that, even to start with that premise, you see that it creates conflict and tension within a human being. Inside, we're pulling in two opposite directions. There's a part of us that we don't like, yet we can't get away from ourselves. So you've got this sort of pulling tension that already creates some sort of discord in the life of a human being. And the truth is that somewhere deep within, every single human being feels unlovable, and as if we lack control and security and safety. We live in this big, scary world that seems to confirm our lack of security and safety, and if we're honest, we're scared. And we do all sorts of things to try to make ourselves feel better and more secure. So let's look at some examples. The baseball coach who's constantly treating his players horribly, he's yelling at them, he's getting in their face, he's calling them names. This guy is just insecure. He's trying to exercise power that he believes he doesn't possess somewhere deep within. The man who's always beating his chest and barking at people is just insecure. Again, he feels inadequate on a deep level, and therefore he overcompensates for it by trying to prove to the world in a very primitive way that he's powerful and worth admiration. And the woman who's constantly judging others and talking poorly about people, she feels inadequate. She feels the need to put people down, usually subtly, but to make herself feel better about this perceived lack that she has. The workaholic often feels deeply unsafe from a material standpoint in the world. Thus, he overcompensates by trying to force material wealth into his world. The helicopter mom feels deeply unsafe in the world. Therefore, she projects that unsafety onto her children. Even the man who visits the brothel is simply looking for validation and control and affirmation on a very deep level. He's just looking in the wrong spot. But the list goes on and on and on. And these are extreme examples, right? Sort of stereotypical examples. But again, it applies to every single human. We all do it. But why do these people do it? Let's go back to the examples. They're insecure. They're protecting some portion of themselves that they believe is unacceptable, and they're trying to just claw and grasp for tiny bits to try and make up for that, to try and receive that affirmation and control, and they can't stop a lot of times. They're afraid that if they stop that scratching, that fighting, that clawing, that putting up that false front, that trying to appear as if I'm secure and safe and powerful, if they stop that, they believe that the little bit of control and affirmation that they currently have will disappear. If they let their hands off the wheel for a second, it will all fall apart, is the belief. And the sad part is that their insecure activities often produce the exact opposite result of what they're hoping for. If the baseball coach would lighten up and treat his players with respect, he'd receive more respect, and thus more control and power and affirmation in the world. If the man who always beats his chest would focus on building others up rather than trying to build himself up in their eyes, he'd receive more affirmation, and so on. And when you look at it this way, you start to see how our insecurities can ruin our lives. Let's look at one more example. The label of annoying is a label that most people avoid receiving. Nobody wants to be called annoying. It's an insecurity of most people. In other words, if you were to call someone annoying, it would likely trigger their insecurities. Try it today. Walk down the street, call a random stranger annoying, see what happens. Here's a little story. So today my wife was saying something to me, and for some reason I was finding her annoying. So she said, "Why are you finding me so annoying right now?" And I responded, "I don't know." And we both giggled a bit and went our separate ways. There was genuinely no animosity between us. She knows I'm just a bit annoyed right now, and that we'll circle back with an improved connection later on in the day. And this was a scenario with no animosity because we both know at this point in our lives that we can be annoying. And we're comfortable with the thought that people, even those who love us the most, are going to find us annoying sometimes. But if my wife were still living in a false reality and trying to project a false front to show that she's never annoying to the world, my agreeing with her that I was annoyed by her would have triggered an insecurity in her, and our conversation would have gone a much different direction. And I share this to show that our insecurities start with the thought, I cannot be perceived as X. And X is annoying, dumb, weak, lazy, ugly, selfish, incapable, and so on and so forth. And we think it would be horrible to be X. So we try to convince ourselves that we aren't X, and we create a false image of ourselves to make ourselves feel better. And it seems like a silly solution, but again, every single human being does it. This is not just for the traumatized or the person who's been through crazy stuff. Every single human being does this, and every single human being needs to work out of this at some point in their life to find greater fulfillment, passion, purpose, and freedom. But we're all so afraid of being associated with these negative attributes. We want to appear perfect, but we're not. None of us are in that very sort of silly sense of the word perfect. At different times and in different spaces, we can all be annoying, dumb, weak, lazy, ugly, selfish, incapable, and so on. And the odd paradox is that the more we attempt to protect these perceived weaknesses, the more they tend to grow and get worse. The more we lie to ourselves and others about our perceived weaknesses, the more of a hold they have on our lives. But if we'll simply let our guard down and say, yeah, maybe I am a little ugly sometimes, or yep, I can be selfish, or yep, I do have a 5 head, and truly embrace the fullness of who we are, good, bad, and ugly, the more these perceived weaknesses lose their power over our lives. But we're all afraid to turn and face these things. Somewhere within, we feel that acknowledging, accepting, and embracing them will cause us to lose the little bit of affirmation and security that we currently have. The thought is, I'll be screwed if I do that. The underlying assumption is that people wouldn't be able to get past it if they knew X about me. And again, the counterintuitive truth is that this couldn't be farther from the truth. The more we can turn toward, accept, and love these things about us, the more powerful and unique we become. Beyond that, the more raw, open, and vulnerable we can make ourselves, the more we bring healing and not suffering to ourselves and the world around us. The solution is acceptance and integration of all of ourselves. Again, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We drop the false fronts and allow the world to see all of us, warts and all. And in doing that, we realize that we're all imperfect. We become far more gracious and loving toward ourselves. And as a result, we're capable of far greater grace and love toward others. This gives us the opportunity to connect with people on a far deeper level and to experience a much more substantial level of richness and satisfaction in our lives. Before we drop the false fronts, life can only go so deep. We're interacting with the world based on falsity, showing the world only a small percentage of our true selves. But as we drop the false fronts and show more of our true selves to the world reciprocates and we experience a completely different level of life. Your insecurities will suck the life out of your life, and they will have you spilling suffering all over the world. The solution is to drop the false fronts, accept the insecurities, and show your true self to the world. And in doing so, you'll step into greater freedom and power in your life.